When Jesus of Nazareth called out to a group of fishermen, tax collectors, and everyday men with the simple yet profound command, "Follow me," none of them could have fully grasped what this call would entail. These men, known today as the 12 apostles or disciples, left their nets, their coin tables, and their families to follow a teacher who spoke with authority and love, who performed miracles, and who claimed to be the Son of God. Their journey was not one paved with gold or lined with glory. Rather, it was filled with peril, rejection, and ultimately, for nearly all of them, martyrdom. The manner in which each disciple met his end tells us not only about the brutal opposition to the message they carried, but also about the depth of their conviction. Their deaths were not mere historical footnotes. They were powerful testaments to the transformative power of their faith and the enduring impact of their mission. This article delves deeply into the lives and deaths of these 12 men, unraveling the historical, traditional, and sometimes legendary narratives that surround their final moments. 1. Simon Peter, crucified upside down in Rome. Simon Peter, the fisherman turned rock of the church, Matthew 16:18, was the impulsive heart of the apostles. His life was a whirlwind of bold faith and human frailty, proclaiming Jesus as the Messiah one moment, denying him thrice the next. Yet his redemption was profound, and his death, around 64 to 68 AD in Rome, stands as one of the most iconic martyrdoms in Christian history. Under Emperor Nero's brutal persecution following the Great Fire of Rome, Christians were scapegoated, and Peter, a towering figure in the early church, became a prime target. Early church fathers like Tertullian and Origen record that Peter was arrested and sentenced to crucifixion, a torturous execution reserved for non-citizens. Feeling unworthy to die in the same manner as Jesus, Peter humbly requested to be crucified upside down. The Romans, perhaps mocking his piety or simply indifferent, granted his wish. The upside-down crucifixion was a spectacle of agony. Peter's wrists and ankles were pierced with iron nails, securing him to a wooden cross with his head pointed toward the ground. In this inverted position, blood rushed to his skull, causing unbearable pressure, blurred vision, and dizziness. Breathing, already labored in crucifixion, was even more torturous as his diaphragm struggled against gravity. The crowd, gathered in Nero's circus or near Vatican Hill, likely jeered, yet tradition holds that Peter preached through his pain, exhorting onlookers to embrace Christ. For hours, perhaps days, he endured, his voice weakening, but his spirit unbroken until death claimed him. His body was likely buried in a nearby necropolis, where St. Peter's Basilica now stands, a monument to his sacrifice. Peter's death, a blend of humility and heroism, became a cornerstone of Christian martyrdom, inspiring countless believers to face persecution with courage. 2. Andrew, bound to the X-shaped cross. Andrew, Peter's brother, was a quiet yet steadfast apostle, known for bringing his sibling to Jesus, John 1:40-42. His missionary zeal took him to Scythia, Greece, and Asia Minor, where he preached with unyielding conviction. His death, around 60 to 70 AD in Patras, Greece, is detailed in the apocryphal Acts of Andrew and other early traditions. In Patras, Andrew's preaching converted many, including Maximilla, the wife of the Roman proconsul Aegeas. Enraged by this affront to pagan worship and his personal honor, Aegeas ordered Andrew's execution. Rather than a standard cross, Andrew was bound to an X-shaped structure, later known as the saltire, or saint. Andrew's cross. Unlike nailing, binding prolonged the agony as ropes cut into his flesh, restricting blood flow and causing excruciating muscle cramps. Exposed to the elements, Andrew suffered dehydration, hunger, and the relentless strain of his body's weight pulling against the ropes. For 2 days he hung in torment, yet accounts describe him preaching tirelessly to the crowd, his voice carrying the gospel even as his body failed. Some spectators, moved by his endurance, pleaded for his release, but Andrew rebuked them, declaring his joy in suffering for Christ. When death finally came, likely from shock or organ failure, his martyrdom inspired conversions, planting Christianity firmly in Greece. The saltire became the symbol of Scotland, where Andrew is revered as the patron saint, and his death remains a testament to quiet faith transformed into bold sacrifice. 3. James, son of Zebedee, beheaded by Herod's sword. James, son of Zebedee and brother of John, was a fiery figure, dubbed a son of thunder alongside his sibling, Mark 3:17. A member of Jesus' inner circle, he witnessed miracles like the Transfiguration and preached with zeal in Judea. His death, around 44 A.D., is one of the few apostolic martyrdoms recorded in the New Testament. Acts 12:1-2. King Herod Agrippa I, eager to appease Jewish authorities hostile to the growing Christian movement, launched a persecution in Jerusalem. James, a prominent leader, was arrested and sentenced to death by beheading. The execution was swift but brutal. James was forced to kneel, and a skilled executioner wielded a broad sword, its blade gleaming before it descended in a single, powerful stroke. The steel severed his neck, sending his head rolling as blood pooled on the ground, a stark spectacle for the gathered crowd. Tradition holds that James faced his fate with unwavering courage, his faith unshaken even as the blade fell. A later Spanish tradition claims James preached in Spain before his death, and his body was miraculously transported to Compostela, where the shrine of Santiago de Compostela now draws pilgrims. While likely apocryphal, this legend underscores his influence. As the first apostle to die, James's martyrdom galvanized the early church, proving that the cost of faith could be paid in blood. 4th, John, son of Zebedee, the survivor of boiling oil. John, the beloved disciple and brother of James, was a pillar of the early church, traditionally credited with the Gospel of John, the Epistles of John, and Revelation. His life was marked by profound theological contributions, but his death, or lack thereof, sets him apart. Unlike his fellow apostles, John may have been the only one to die a natural death, though not without facing severe persecution. Around 95 A.D., under Emperor Domitian, John was arrested in Ephesus and sent to Rome. According to the Acts of John and Tertullian, he was plunged into a cauldron of boiling oil before a Roman audience, likely in the Colosseum or a similar arena. The oil, heated to a scalding temperature, should have seared his flesh, causing third-degree burns and rapid death. Miraculously, John emerged unscathed, his body untouched by the bubbling liquid. The crowd, stunned by this divine intervention, reportedly saw conversions, but the authorities, undeterred, exiled him to the island of Patmos. There, enduring harsh conditions, he received the visions of Revelation. After Domitian's death, John returned to Ephesus, where he lived to an advanced age, possibly over 90, dying peacefully around 100 A.D. Some later traditions claim he was martyred, but most early sources, including Jerome, support a natural death. His survival through persecution made him a living bridge to the apostolic era, his writings shaping Christian theology for centuries. 5. Philip, stoned and crucified in Hierapolis. Philip, often distinguished from Philip the deacon, was a practical apostle whose missionary work took him to Asia Minor, Syria, and possibly Phrygia. His death, around 80 A.D. in Hierapolis, modern-day Turkey, is detailed in the apocryphal Acts of Philip and other traditions. In Hierapolis, Philip's preaching and miracles, such as healings and exorcisms, drew many converts, including the wife of a local magistrate. This provoked the ire of pagan priests, who saw his influence as a threat to their temple worship. Arrested and condemned, Philip faced a dual execution, stoning followed by crucifixion. The stoning was a brutal prelude, with a mob hurling rocks that fractured his bones and tore his flesh, leaving him bloodied but alive. He was then hoisted onto a cross, either nailed or bound, his body racked with pain from both the stoning and the crucifixion's slow suffocation. Some accounts suggest he was crucified upside down, like Peter, though this is less certain. For hours, Philip endured, his voice reportedly calling out to his followers to remain steadfast. His sister Mariamne and the apostle Bartholomew, present at his death, witnessed his courage, which inspired conversions in Hierapolis. Archaeological finds, including a church dedicated to Philip in Hierapolis, support his presence there, though the exact details of his death blend history and tradition. 6th, Bartholomew, flayed alive in Armenia. Bartholomew, possibly Nathanael of the Gospels, was a missionary whose journeys took him to India, Armenia, and Mesopotamia. His death, one of the most horrific among the apostles, occurred around 68 to 70 A.D. in Armenia, as recorded in the Martyrdom of Bartholomew and other traditions. In Armenia, Bartholomew's preaching converted many, including members of the royal court, possibly Ptolemais, a local king. This enraged King Astyages, who ordered a gruesome execution. Bartholomew was to be flayed alive. The process was barbaric. Executioners used sharp knives to peel his skin from his body while he was still conscious. Each cut exposed raw muscle and nerves, the pain unimaginable as blood poured from his wounds. Some accounts suggest he was crucified afterward, his skinless body nailed to a cross, while others claim he was beheaded to end his suffering. Bartholomew's endurance reportedly converted some of his executioners, who were awestruck by his faith. His flayed skin became a symbol of his sacrifice, and in Christian art, he is often depicted holding it, a haunting image of devotion. His death helped establish Christianity in Armenia, where he remains a patron saint, his legacy enduring in one of the world's oldest Christian nations. 7. Thomas, speared on India's shores. Thomas, the doubting Thomas, who needed to touch Jesus' wounds to believe in the resurrection, John 20:24-29, became a bold missionary. Tradition holds that he traveled to India, preaching in Kerala and Milapur. His death, around 72 A.D. in Milapur, is detailed in the Acts of Thomas. Thomas's success in converting locals, including the wife of a local king or noble, provoked the wrath of pagan priests. Accused of sorcery, he was attacked on a hill now called St. Thomas Mount in Chennai, India. A mob or a soldier speared him, thrusting lances through his torso. The spears tore through flesh and organs, causing massive internal bleeding. Thomas collapsed under the scorching sun, his blood staining the earth as he gasped his final prayers. The Christian community in Kerala, one of the oldest in the world, traces its roots to Thomas's mission. His tomb in Mylapore, part of the San Tome Basilica, remains a pilgrimage site. Thomas's transformation from doubt to martyrdom sowed the seeds of Christianity in India. His death, a powerful witness to his unshakable faith. 8. Matthew. Slain by sword or fire. Matthew, the tax collector turned apostle, is traditionally credited with the Gospel of Matthew. His missionary work took him to Ethiopia, Persia, or Parthia, though details are scarce. The Martyrdom of Matthew provides the primary account of his death around 70 to 80 A.D. In Ethiopia, Matthew's preaching converted the king's wife and daughter, enraging King Hyrtacus. Condemned for his influence, Matthew was either beheaded or stabbed with a sword while praying at an altar. The executioner's blade sliced through his neck or chest, blood gushing as his body slumped. Some traditions claim he was burned at the stake, his flesh consumed by flames as he prayed, the fire's heat intensifying his agony until he suffocated or burned out. Though less documented than others, Matthew's death reflects the hostility faced by missionaries in foreign lands. His gospel, a bridge between Jewish and Gentile Christianity, ensures his legacy endures, his martyrdom a quiet but profound sacrifice. 9. James, son of Alpheus, crushed by stones, or Club James, son of Alpheus, often called James the Less, is a shadowy figure among the apostles. His ministry likely centered in Judea or Persia, and his death, around 62 A.D., is recorded by Hegesippus and other traditions. One account claims James was thrown from the pinnacle of the Jerusalem temple for refusing to renounce Christ. Surviving the fall, he was beaten with a fuller's club, a heavy tool used in cloth-making, until his skull was crushed, brains and blood spilling onto the ground. Another tradition suggests he was stoned, rocks shattering his bones and tearing his flesh until he succumbed. Both methods were brutal, designed to maximize suffering and deter others. James's death, though less celebrated, underscores the constant peril faced by Christians in Jerusalem, where tensions with Jewish authorities often turned deadly. His quiet faithfulness added to the church's foundation, built on the blood of its martyrs. 10th, Thaddeus, Jude. Pierced by arrows or axed Thaddeus, also called Jude or Judas, not Iscariot, preached in Mesopotamia, Persia, and Armenia alongside Simon the Zealot. His death, around 65 to 70 A.D., is described in the Acts of Simon and Jude. Arrested for refusing to sacrifice to pagan gods, Thaddeus faced a brutal execution. One tradition claims he was shot with arrows, the shafts piercing his chest and abdomen, each one causing searing pain as blood poured out. Another account suggests he was hacked with an axe, the heavy blade cleaving through flesh and bone in a series of gruesome blows. Some sources mention crucifixion, though this is less common. Thaddeus's death, shared with Simon, strengthened Christian communities in Persia and Armenia. In art, he is often depicted with an axe or club, symbols of his violent end, his sacrifice a beacon for believers in hostile lands. 11th, Simon the Zealot, sawn in half or crucified Simon, known as the Zealot for his possible revolutionary past, preached alongside Thaddeus in Persia or Armenia. His death, around 65 to 70 A.D., is recorded in the Acts of Simon and Jude. One tradition claims Simon was sawn in half, a horrific execution where a large two-handled saw was used to bisect his body. The blade tore through skin, muscle, and organs, the pain excruciating as blood and tissue spilled. Another account suggests crucifixion, his body nailed to a cross in the familiar agony of apostolic martyrdom. Both methods reflect the extreme hostility faced by Christians in pagan regions. Simon's death, whether by saw or cross, transformed his zeal for revolution into zeal for Christ, his sacrifice strengthening the church in distant lands. 12th, Judas Iscariot, the betrayer's shameful end. Judas Iscariot, infamous for betraying Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, met a tragic end soon after his treachery. His death is recorded in Matthew 27, 3-10 and Acts 1, 18-19, with differing details. In Matthew's account, Judas, consumed by remorse, threw the silver into the temple and hanged himself. The rope tightened around his neck, cutting off air and blood flow until he died, his body swaying in the wind. Acts describes a grimmer scene. Judas purchased a field where he fell headlong. His body burst open, and all his intestines spilled out. Some reconcile these by suggesting his hanging body, left to decompose, fell and burst. The field, called Akeldama, or the field of blood, became a symbol of his betrayal. Judas's death, whether by rope or fall, was a grim epilogue to his betrayal, a cautionary tale of remorse without redemption. 13th, Matthias, stoned and beheaded. Matthias, chosen by Lot to replace Judas Iscariot, Acts 1:26, preached in Judea, Cappadocia, or Ethiopia. His death, around 80 A.D., is recorded in the Acts of Andrew and Matthias. Condemned for his preaching, Matthias was stoned by a mob, rocks fracturing his bones and tearing his flesh until he was near death. To ensure his demise, executioners beheaded him, the sword's blade delivering a final, bloody stroke. Some traditions suggest crucifixion, but stoning and beheading are more common. Matthias's death, though less documented, mirrors the persecution faced by his peers. His quiet faithfulness earned him a place among the 12, his blood adding to the church's foundation. 14. Paul, beheaded on the Ostian Way. Paul, the apostle to the Gentiles, was a former persecutor turned missionary powerhouse. His journeys across the Roman Empire spread Christianity far and wide. His death, around 64 to 68 A.D., occurred during Nero's persecution, alongside Peter's. As a Roman citizen, Paul was spared crucifixion and sentenced to beheading. On the Ostian Way outside Rome, he knelt before the executioner, who raised a sword and severed his head in one clean stroke. Blood sprayed as his head rolled, ending a life marked by imprisonment and suffering. A legend claims his head bounced 3 times, with springs appearing at each spot, giving rise to the Trefontaine site. Paul's epistles, written before his death, remain a theological cornerstone, his martyrdom sealing his legacy as a giant of the faith. Conclusion: a tapestry of sacrifice. The deaths of Jesus' disciples weave a tapestry of courage, pain, and triumph. Each apostle's end, whether by cross, sword, stone, or flame, reflects a willingness to pay the ultimate price for their faith. Their martyrdoms, often gruesome, transformed a fledgling movement into a global force, their blood watering the seeds of Christianity. While some details are historical, others are steeped in tradition, preserved through centuries of storytelling, yet the essence remains. These men, touched by Jesus, faced death with a conviction that resonates today. Their sacrifices remind us that faith can shine brightest in the darkest moments, their legacy enduring in the hearts of billions.